Tell about James Stewart.
An inmate named Arnold, said, "Jerry, would you go visit James Stewart down here in the cell block?" I said, "Sure." So I had the guard open up his cell, and he's in a wheelchair with no legs. And over a period of time, I gained his confidence. And I said, "Hey, James, how did you lose your legs?" "I stepped on a landmine in Iraq." And boom, lost both of them. And he said, after that, I was sent home. And I lived with my wife, my father-in-law, my son and daughter. And he says, one afternoon, my wife says, "Honey, we're going to go do this and that. You want to come with us?" James says, "No, I'll just stay here. You guys go ahead." Well, this was before cell phones. But it kept getting later and later, and about 11 o'clock that night, they weren't home. He was very worried. There was a knock at the door. It was California Highway Patrol. And he said to him, he says, "Mr. Stewart?" He says, "Yes, sir." He said, "Your wife has been involved in an accident. I'll take you to the hospital." So he loaded his wheelchair in the cruiser, and they took off, and he got to the hospital. His wife was dead. His father-in-law was dead. His son was dead. And his little daughter was in critical condition. And he said, "Jerry, before I went to Iraq, my daughter just hung onto my finger, and we would walk around. And then she looked, he said, my daughter looked at me and says, 'Daddy, I hurt myself,' and she died."
Oh.
I couldn't hardly keep the tears back as he told me that. I said, "James, how long was it from the time you lost both legs till you lost your whole family?" He said, 8 months.
What?
I'd never, ever, in all those 25 years, ever heard anything like that. Well, James did something he shouldn't have done. I don't know what it was. Landed him in prison. But this I know. He got things right with God. And when he told the other inmates that God's grace was sufficient, it meant something, being what he went through. Mm-hmm. So God used him mightily. He was transferred to another prison, so I don't know where he went. But James, good friend and a man of God, and really made a difference in the lives of the inmates.
When you think about the pain and suffering, and you have a society where a lot of times they don't allow men to properly grieve, right?
That's right.
And if you don't cry and use the tears that God designed for you to shed, it becomes anger. And this is where the society has failed a lot of people who are going through tragic things, because there's no outlet, and a lot of men's groups need to be formed where they're allowed to cry and grieve. And in tribal communities, they have ceremonies of mourning ceremonies where they're dancing and they're beating their chest, and they're able to shed tears. And I think that's really a healthy way to mourn versus holding it in and having so much anger and bitterness and then acting that out in violent ways.
I agree.
Or by escaping through drugs and alcohol or money or any other addictions. So this is where, we need to have a system that allows people to take the time to grieve and mourn. I mean, these are horribly tragic stories, and you don't even imagine that they could happen to one person, but they do all the time.
Yes.
So I am so glad you were there for him and showed him love and showed him the love of God, despite all of the things that he went through.
Yeah.